Take the notebooks. Put the old schoolteacher out in the rain, he told the guard. 30 years later, that dying schoolteacher's son would decide whether Dr. Pierce lived or died. The old man went quietly, because a man with nothing left has nothing left to argue with. A boy was waiting for him under the awning across the road, 7 years old, holding his father's hat with both hands. Pierce never looked down at that boy, and it was the most expensive thing he ever failed to do. His name was Dr. Alistair Pierce, and by 40 he ruled the largest private hospital empire in the country. Every clinic that carried his name carried one promise: the Pierce Protocol, the treatment that made hopeless children well again. Parents named their children after him, and he kept their thank you letters in a glass case beside his office door. Reporters called him a genius, and he let them. He never once told them where the cure had really come from. He lived by one private rule, and the rule was simple: never open a door you have already closed. Because the cure was never his. He took it from a poor man who trusted him, then buried the man's name like a body. But a buried thing keeps its shape down there, waiting for enough rain to wash the dirt off it. 30 years earlier, Pierce was clever and ambitious, and going nowhere. Brilliant enough to know he wasn't brilliant enough to be great. He was 34 years old, on his 4th research grant, and all 4 had died quietly on his desk. He ate his dinners out of the vending machine on the 3rd floor, and told himself the world owed him something. That is the dangerous kind of man, the one who is almost great and knows exactly how much he is missing. Then, on a wet Tuesday in November, the elevator opened and his whole life changed shape. Then a patient came to his ward that no one else would see. An old schoolteacher named Mr. Ellis, coughing into his sleeve, carrying a cardboard box tied with string. He had walked 2 miles from the bus station in the rain, and he apologized for the water he dripped on the floor. He had taught chemistry to poor children for 31 years, and his shirt collar had been mended twice. Ellis was dying of a rare illness, the same one that had taken his wife. It ran in the blood of the poorest families in the county. He had watched his wife go in 9 months, and he learned every word the doctors used while she did. Then he went home, cleared the kitchen table, and started teaching himself what nobody would teach him. 20 years on a schoolteacher's wage, he had studied it alone. Inside that box were the notebooks, his life's work, a treatment he had built by hand. 9 notebooks, numbered on the spine, the ink gone brown in the early ones. And he untied the string slowly, the way other men handle something that belongs in a church. But he didn't want money or fame. He wanted one thing, to see it made real, so children like his own little son would not have to die. His boy was 7 and carried his mother's blood, and Ellis did not say that part out loud. He said only that he had perhaps a year left, and he would like to spend it being useful. Pierce poured him a cup of machine coffee and opened the first notebook just to be polite. Pierce read a single page and his heart stopped. It was real, it was genius, and it was worth more than his whole career. The working on page 11 solved a problem 4 funded laboratories had failed to solve in a decade. He read for 2 hours without speaking, and Mr. Ellis waited with his hands folded, like a boy at a school prize giving. Somewhere in the 2nd hour, he stopped reading like a doctor and started reading like a thief. He worked out how much of this existed anywhere else in the world, and the answer was nowhere. So he asked, very gently, whether anyone at the university had ever seen this work. Ellis said no, and he said it proudly, because he thought he was being asked whether he had waited for the right man. So he smiled and he lied. The work is flawed, he told the old man, worthless, the daydream of a sick amateur. He watched 20 years leave the old man's face in about 4 seconds. And Ellis nodded and apologized for wasting a busy doctor's evening. And that apology is the worst part of this story. At the door, he hesitated, because that box was the only thing he owned that mattered. He would keep the notebooks for review, he said. Then he had a guard walk Mr. Ellis out into the rain. By morning, the work belonged to Dr. Pierce. That same night, he copied all 9 notebooks out in his own handwriting, page by page, until his hand cramped. He locked the originals in the bottom drawer of a steel filing cabinet, because burning things leaves ash. 30 years later, a woman with far better instincts than his would open that exact drawer. 11 months after that rainy Tuesday, the Pierce Protocol appeared in a medical journal, under one name only. The telephone in his office did not stop ringing for a year. And 2 miles away, above a laundry, an old man was still waiting politely for his box to come back. And then, when the journal came out, Mr. Ellis walked back to the institute with that page folded in his pocket. The receptionist told him Dr. Pierce was in meetings, and she told him that every week for 4 months. Mr. Ellis wrote letters. He begged the institute for a single hearing. Everyone came back, stamped and unopened. Pierce had written 5 words into the old man's file. Unwell, obsessive, do not encourage. After that, there was not a doctor left in the county who would sit down with him. By spring, a neighbor had to help him up his own stairs, resting twice on the landing. So they took him to the shining new Pierce Clinic, where his treatment was finally being given. He waited 6 hours in the queue, with his small son asleep across his lap. The clerk said the course cost more than a school teacher earned in 3 years, and asked how he intended to pay it. He said that he had helped to write it, and he heard exactly how that sounded coming out of his mouth. They asked him to leave before he upset the other patients, and it was raining again outside. The illness took him within the year. He died in a borrowed bed, still certain the truth would find its way out someday. He died of an illness his own notebooks knew how to stop, 2 miles from a cabinet full of the cure. And he left behind one last copy of his notebook, hidden in a coffee tin. And he left behind a 7-year-old boy named Daniel. The tin still smelled faintly of coffee 30 years later, because Daniel never once washed it out. Daniel grew up knowing 2 things by heart. His father was a good man, and the great Dr. Pierce was a thief. But he didn't grow up angry. His father's last words had asked him not to. "Don't strike back," Ellis had told him. "Just be the kind of doctor I hoped that man would be." And so he did it the slow way, night classes and a hospital cleaning job, 12 years of it. He was 30, before anyone called him doctor, and he cried in a stairwell when they finally did. He finished his father's work himself, quietly on kitchen tables, exactly the way it had started. Then he opened a free clinic in the old mill district, in a shop unit that used to sell shoes. The years were good to Dr. Pierce. The cure he stole saved thousands, and the whole world lined up to thank him for it. He was never a monster in public, and that is the part people always get wrong about men like him. Somewhere in that first year, he decided the work had needed him in order to matter at all. He set the price of the treatment himself in a board meeting that lasted 11 minutes. Every clinic with his name on it took his rule along with it. No payment cleared, no treatment started. There was a woman at one of those windows one winter with a sick daughter and a card that kept getting declined. He built towers and bought silence. His own son grew up soft and spoiled, learning only how to spend what his father took. He was 68 the year everything felt permanently safe, and that was the year his protege started staying late in the archive. The one person he never bought was his own protege. Dr. Vance was young, brilliant, and hungry, exactly the way he had once been. He liked her because she reminded him of himself, and he never once followed that thought to the end of it. For years, she studied him. She learned how he smiled while he took things. She learned it very well. She noticed that the protocol's earliest working was written in a handwriting that did not match his. It took her 2 years and 1 key from a dead archivist's desk to reach the bottom drawer. Then, one quiet morning, she did to him exactly what he had done to Mr. Ellis. She had dug up the buried secret. The original notebooks in the old man's own hand, dated years before Pierce ever published a word. He was in the middle of a sentence about the Foundation Gala when that folder landed in front of him. And she didn't do it to right a wrong. She did it to take the throne. She traded the proof for his empire, and the board handed it to her. She never said the name Ellis out loud in that room, and the notebooks went straight back into a drawer. Overnight, the great Dr. Pierce was finished. Fraud, thief, his name scrubbed off the very cure that had carried it. They took the towers and the accounts. They stripped the medals off his name, and his own son took whatever was left and stopped answering the phone. The guard, who walked him out of his own building, was 23 years old and apologized the whole way. It was raining outside, and nobody in that lobby offered him a car. Then his own blood turned on him. The same rare illness he'd built a fortune curing began to show up in his test results. He had always known it was possible, and he had always assumed his money would be standing in between. For 30 years, he had priced that cure far out of reach of the poor. Now he was the poor. Now he couldn't afford it either. He had 1 card left to play, so he put on his last good suit and went back to his flagship hospital. He knew every corridor in it, and his name was still faintly ghosted on the marble where they had prized the letters off. He told the young clerk at the window who he was, and she was kind about it, which somehow made it worse. Then she said the words his own policy had taught her. No payment cleared, no treatment started. The lobby was full. Every person in it knew his face, and he had to be walked out through all of them. Broken, sick, forgotten by everyone he had ever bought, he ended up where he had sent so many others. A free clinic in the old mill district, in the rain. He shuffled in with the others and took a cracked plastic chair and a paper number. No one in that room knew his ruined face. When they finally called him back, the doctor who looked up from the desk was young, calm, and kind. His white coat was worn thin at the cuffs. He was somewhere near 37, and something in his face was familiar in a way Pierce could not place. He treated the broken old man gently. He listened. He didn't flinch at the famous name on the file. He only said, "We'll help you. Please sit." He asked how long it had been since he had eaten properly, and he asked it without a trace of judgment. On the desk between them sat an old notebook, its pages soft and yellowed from 30 years of handling. Pierce looked at it, and his whole body went cold. He knew that handwriting. He had spent 30 years pretending he had never seen it. It was the same hand he had copied out page by page on the night that made him rich. The young doctor watched him understand. Then he said it softly. "My father wrote that. His name was Ellis. You threw him out into the rain." Pierce tried to get out of the chair and couldn't, and the little room went very quiet around him. The boy from the coffee tin had grown up. He had finished his father's work himself, quietly, and used it to heal the poor for free. Everything. Pierce had stolen a fortune to hoard. This man had simply been giving away. The queue outside that door was the same queue his father had once waited in, except nobody here was asked to pay. Pierce broke. He wept and begged, not for his life, but for one word of forgiveness he had no right to ask for. Daniel healed him anyway. He gave him the very cure his father had died dreaming of, and asked for nothing in return. And Pierce asked him why. He said his father had told him not to strike back. Then he did the one thing Pierce could never undo for himself. He put Mr. Ellis's name back on the cure for all the world to finally see. A hand that strikes the weak will one day strike itself. Pierce lived out his last years, knowing the man he threw into the rain had raised the only soul on earth willing to lift him back up. As the last time he walked out of that clinic, it was raining again, and this time somebody held the door open for him. If you believe every kindness and every cruelty finds its way home, subscribe to Karma Tales. The next story cuts even deeper, and it will stay with you long after it ends.